Hey everyone, this is Zoras, not Casuals, and in today's video, we're gonna talk about KvK1's strategy in Rise of Kingdoms, as well as commander pairings that are the most important and the most successful in KvK. We're gonna go over open field, rallies, garrison, and even zeroing, and go over some of our best tips and tricks that let us win KvK1 so overwhelmingly. So of course, when we're in KvK1, you've only had two Wheels of Fortune, which unlocks Richard and YSG, which are two of the most important commanders for KvK1. You also have Khan that will unlock near the end, which also can be very important, but usually the war is mostly over by that point. Now of course, the best commanders in KvK1 are usually going to be Legendaries, and while free-to-play players have a very important role in KvK1, it is very recommended that you work with your whales and your strong players who have the best commanders, because they will be the one leading the rallies and garrisoning and zeroing cities. So anyone who doesn't have these legendary commanders will have the role of a support or filling up rallies and flags with the correct troop count, which is as important. Now, the biggest tip in KvK1, as I just said, is really filling up whatever activity you're doing, whether it's a rally or zeroing or a flag garrison, with the absolute correct troops. So when you're defending an objective, usually infantry is king and you only want to put infantry. It will be led by commanders such as Richard and Martel, and it will be filled with infantry almost without exception. One player sending a wrong unit in there can mess up a lot of bonuses. So one of the biggest key in winning KvK is making sure that your players understand troop types, having to go with the right commanders, and that they look at the commanders before sending troop types. Now, another very important thing is that when, for example, you're defending a flag and you're reinforcing it, you have to be careful on the time that it takes to reach. So for example, right now, to reinforce this, it would take me 46 seconds to walk there, which is not a big deal. But if I was to reinforce something further away from my city, for example here, now you can see that the time is now 4 minutes 39. So the entire time that this army will be marching, the whole 4 minutes, you will see that the reinforcement capacity is taken. 200,000 of my units have taken space in this flag, but they have not reached yet, and they won't reach for another 3 minutes 20 seconds. Which means that this flag is weaker by 200,000 units right now. So in KvK, this is something that's also very important. Do not reinforce from far away. Make sure that you first, I would say, bring your army right here. So for example, you have this option now, march here, and then, see, I'll march here for 4 minutes. And then once you're here, put it in. It will be so much better for your army and for your alliance and the defense of this flag. Now also, one of the biggest factor of KvK1 is Wai Songyi, because of his AoE, which as we know is a big circle around him. I'll show you right here. You'll see the whole green area that will spawn around every few seconds. That entire area is a big AoE damage area of effect. So if you are trapped in that area while there's a rally or a defense going on, you will lose a lot of troops. Now in KvK1, YSG is very widely used because of this, which means that often in garrison, he will be used as a secondary to Richard or Martel, which means that if you are attacking a flag, for example, and he will be triggering this AoE every few seconds, but he will be triggering it with an army of 1.5 million instead of a simple march of 200,000, for example. So it will pack a much bigger punch and it will do a much higher amount of damage, which means that you will never want to be near an AoE of a Wai Songyi, whether it be when attacking a flag or when a rally is attacking your flag. You don't want to be near it. If it's attacking this flag, your armies have to stay far away for reinforcement of whatever you're reinforcing. Do not be near Wai Songyi doing an AoE, because it will kill your troops like crazy and you will be very sad. Now this is why KvK1 is predominantly dominated by Wai Songyi. He is going to be everywhere because he gives such an area of control which prevents players from swarming and being around. It will help in defense from flags or fortress, or defense from cities. And when you rally stuff, it will mean that if Hwai Sung-yi is in that army, nobody can come near or swarm you, else they will take tremendously high damage and it will not be worth it. So this is why I always say, and I have always been saying, that Hwai Sung-yi is the #1 priority for any and every player. 2 expertise. He has the most value in this game. He permits an incredibly easy farming of barbarians. He permits an incredibly high defense capability for swarm and just AoE control in the open field. He is amazing and he will be dominating all of KvK. So you have to watch out for him and use him properly. Now we'll jump right into commander pairings that are very successful in KvK. First of all, I'm going to start with open field commanders. Now, of course, Richard and Martel are 2 of the most common commanders that you will see in the open field, as infantry is one of the most important unit type during KvK 1. It is obviously very tanky and does a lot of damage, and while you're in KvK 1, Richard doesn't have a lot of counters. His healing is incredibly powerful, and there is no commanders that reduce healing or prevent healing, such as there will be after KvK 1. So Richard is really the god of the battlefield. A lot of people do Richard primary and Hwai Sung-yi secondary. Now, Richard is very important to have around 5511 at least. He can be expertise, which is good, but 5511 is a very, very workable Richard, which a lot of players will have. And then your Hwai Sung-yi can be 5511 or expertise when coming in with a Richard or a Martel as a secondary. Now what that creates is that Hwai Sung-yi doesn't care about archers, he just cares about doing a lot of damage. So if you put him behind either of these commanders, you will have a very, very strong tanky infantry march that also does a lot of AoE damage. One other option, especially for free-to-play players, is Aethelflaed, which is an incredibly strong commander as well in the open field. You would bring a mixed army, but mostly infantry, and you would also put someone like Hwai Sung-yi as secondary, or Joan of Arc for free-to-play players, because it will bring a very high buff, and it works very well with Aethelflaed. Now, she also has a very good AoE damage, and also has some kind of slow and counterattack damage reduction here for Cavs, as well as just a great here boost. So when you are rallying or when you're just attacking in the open field, if you have more than 3 units or 3 or more units, you will do 20% more damage. And when you expertise her, she has a 20% damage to troops affected by slow. So she obviously has a slow of her own here, but also in the support tree, you have a slow as the last ability. So that is very good there. Now, something else that we'll see very often in the open field, of course, is going to be a lot of Cav players, such as Minamoto and Cao Cao as a secondary, or you'll see Minamoto Pelagius, or you'll see Pelagius Belisarius. All of these are very good comps for Cavs, but as there is a lot of infantry in KvK 1, these are riskier marches to use because you can get melted quite easily, and it is not a good idea to use these marches to attack other infantry players that are in the open field. It will be very costly to you, but they are very solid in some situation. Of course, they have a lot of mobility and they can pick off weaker player or pick off archers or mixed armies or Joan of Arc's army, which are usually used by support players to buff. So they have a very important role, as well as it will be a march that's very, very often used to rally other cities or rally objectives that are not full or don't have the right commanders defending them, which happens quite often in KvK because there's a lot of action and a lot of fronts. So Minamoto has a very important role in there, but it is not the most focused commander here because of its weakness to infantry, which is a very dominant unit type in KvK 1. Now, if we go in the epic tier, of course, for free-to-play players, if you don't have a Richard that's 5511 or a Martel that's 5511, you should still be able to have at least one commander that's pretty strong, whether it's Richard or Hwai Sung-yi. As a free-to-play, you should be able to have him at least 5511. And there are free-to-play players that have an expertise Hwai Sung-yi in my alliance already for KvK 1. So it is definitely possible. As a low spender especially, it will be very easy if you save up from the beginning. Now, of course, my top pick for open field in KvK 1 is Sun Tzu as an epic commander. He is obviously one of the best epic commander in the game. We have an entire guide on him that we just released last week, so check that out if you are interested. This commander is obviously very, very good because of his AoE, and the fact that he leads an infantry army which he boosts the health of and reduce the damage taken of, and just general skill damage, and this is just a really high damage and rage generation ability. So Sun Tzu does a very good job. He can be built as both full infantry or full skill and do very well. I usually do full infantry with a bit of skill, of course, and he is a very good leader or a very good secondary. So you can do Richard with Sun Tzu or Martel with Sun Tzu, or you can do Sun Tzu with Richard or Martel as secondary if you haven't leveled them up, or you can put anyone as a secondary to Sun Tzu. To be honest, you can do anyone such as Wai Songyi. You can put Olji, which is a very good strong infantry march. You can even put someone as Joan of Arc if you would like, or you could put someone as Aethelflaed as secondary just for the damage AoE that it brings. Now this is going to be one of the most important marches that you have. I really recommend something like Sun Tzu Richard or Sun Tzu Olji if you really want to be tanky and do some good damage. But there is really a lot of combinations here. You can't really go wrong as long as your Sun Tzu is built properly and that you're bringing only infantry with him. Now, as a free-to-play player, again, as we said, Aethelflaed is going to be one of your main tools because you have the possibility of bringing her to a high level and expertise for free. And by KvK 1, you should be pretty close or able to have her expertise already. Now, the biggest importance of a free-to-play player as a support in the open field will be having a Joan of Arc. Now, Joan of Arc has an incredible boost here. This buff is absolutely amazing, but she is very squishy. So the most important thing that you can do as a free-to-play player is bringing her as a secondary on one of your tanky commander. So whether it be Richard, whether it be Sun Tzu, or even if you're going to bring something like Olji, she will be a very good secondary to any of them. You want it to be as tanky as possible, so most likely a full infantry army. And you basically just want to bring her around the fight and make sure that she does her AoE buffs all the time. If you get targeted, it's a good idea to back off and then come back again in the fight. She will really just do a very good role of buffing everybody. It is very important that you have her there. Now, something very new now that has happened is Mulan has just come out. So we didn't get to use her in our KvK 1. But players who are starting now and are going to be in KvK 1 in a few weeks or a few months will have Mulan, and because she's going to be a commander from the gold key, you will be able to have this skill probably leveled up to 5, and you could do a 5-1-1-1 or 5-5-1-1 Mulan. Now, I don't recommend investing in your soul sculptures in her, but I still recommend bringing her at least if you have this at level 5, because this buff is still very strong. It lasts 2 seconds, so it's not as good, or it's near as good as Joan's buff, but the stats that it gives is very high. So something like Joan and Mulan together in the open field will obviously create a very strong buff because they do stack. Now, I would not recommend bringing them together in one army. I would do something such as Richard and Joan, and then Aethelflaed and Mulan, or vice versa. Or you can put Mulan as secondary to Richard, and then put Joan as a secondary to Olji or Sun Tzu or something like that, or even Martel if you have him leveled up a little bit. As long as you bring these two marches, and one of which will be with Aethelflaed, hopefully, you will have two very strong buff, and Aethelflaed has a very strong debuff. So if you're able to bring these 3 commanders as a free-to-play player, you will be buffing your Wells and your strong player like crazy, and your value will be insanely good. This is going to be something very important, and it is a very precious and mandatory role in KvK because not everybody can bring these commanders all the time, but as a free-to-play, it is one of the things that you really can do best. Now, there is also a few other commanders that do well in the open field in KvK 1. Obviously, Pelagius is one of them. He leads a very strong Cav army, same as Minamoto. He's just a free-to-play version of Minamoto, basically. Now, you can pair him with Belisarius or with Baybars, as Baybars has an AoE. So if you're going to be fighting in the open field, AoE is obviously very important. You can also even pair him with Wai Songyi, to be honest. It would work very well. Same as Minamoto can be paired with Wai Songyi. As long as they have skill damage, as they do, it is going to be something that will work very well. Now, my last point will be when you're a free-to-play or any kind of player, to be honest, and you want to kill farmers or you want to kill weak players, Belisarius is going to be one of your most important commander because of the mobility and the cav trees and his ability here that makes him do a lot of damage to weak units, and this one that makes him run away faster after a fight. This will be very important because it will make it so you don't get caught and don't get killed, but you can kill a lot of farmer with that. The same thing goes for Cao Cao, of course, but he is a more expensive to level up and skill up. But if you have him, he does the same role as Belisarius, and they can even be paired together for an ultimate mobility farm killing march. Next, I'm going to talk about garrisoning. So when you're having a flag or a fortress, what do you put as defense? Of course, it will be infantry 99% of the time, and you will not be doing that if you're not a pay-to-win player or a whale. So it will only be legendary commanders that have to be used, for the exception of maybe Sun Tzu, which can be used as well. But the best thing and the most common thing you will see in a flag will be Martel with YSG as secondary. Now Martel has a very good toolkit here for infantry and defense, very good shield, and gives a damage bonus of 30%, which YSG can use to use his own AoE ability. So 30% on his ability makes incredibly high amount of damages. So this is one of the most common pairing for both open field and garrison. It also has a high counterattack damage bonus, which is exactly what you want when you're getting attacked, especially if you're getting swarmed. And YSG makes it so being swarmed is even less worth it. So this is something that works really well. Now, one of your well will definitely have him expertise, and this will make it even better because it's just more stats to infantry. But again, this is one of the most important thing. You have to make sure that infantry units only are used in the army that are garrisoning any kind of objectives. Infantry is very important because if you don't have infantry, these buffs won't apply, and it is a very big deal in KvK. Now, the same thing can be done with Richard. You can do Richard YSG in a flag, and it works very well. Or you can even do Martel Richard or Richard Martel. These work very well. Now, Richard Martel together make for a very tanky, but not a very high damage. So if you're really just tanking and you don't want to like kill the march attacking the rally, or you are just basically waiting, this is something that works really well. Now, Richard, Martel, and YSG in any combination will be used most, like 95% of the time, as any kind of garrison. They are the three commanders that garrison, and it is basically all you're going to see. And infantry is basically all you're going to see as well. There really isn't any other ways of doing this. You can maybe add Sun Tzu instead of any of these commanders as a secondary, which would do also a very good job as garrisoning. But having expertise Richard, Martel, and YSG by whales is going to be something more beneficial than Sun Tzu. It's really just much better. But again, Sun Tzu can do the same thing for a free-to-play or some weaker player that's still very strong. And when there's no well online, you can do Richard Sun Tzu or Martel Sun Tzu, or you can even do Sun Tzu YSG. All of that would still work. This brings me to my next point of, because KvK1 is so dominated by Richard, Martel, and infantry, how do you rally it? How do you counter it? We obviously cannot have a Minamoto rallying a full infantry Richard Martel or Richard YSG. It just wouldn't, I mean, it will work a little bit, but you will lose a lot more, and it will be very costly because it is Cavs against infantry, which is countering yourself. It doesn't work very well. There is a few options for rallying in KvK1. Now, I will give you my number one tip that I cannot believe that so many people did not know this yet in KvK1. When you have KvK1 and you want to win, you will need one of your well to have a proper archer march, because that is the only real way that you're ever going to be beating these Richard, Martel, infantry, garrison. There is not many ways of beating them until KvK 2 and 3 and 4, where there's a lot more commanders. In KvK 1, you don't have the commanders to beat them. You need archers because they counter these marches. Now, there is only one really good army that counters this, and it is YSG with El Cid. Now, YSG primary and El Cid secondary is the most common way of seeing this. You obviously need them to be fully expertise, and that means that it needs to be one of your well that does this. This is what we had. We had one well with a completely expertise, both of them high level 60 for YSG with all the equipment and gear for Archer, and it burns away Richard Martel like crazy. It's like butter to them. It is something that no one seems to really expect because archers are not used in KvK1 almost ever in the open field, especially you will almost never see them. They don't have the tankiness or the movement speed to survive in open field. It is something that I would not recommend for anyone but really strong whales. But for this rally, if you want to counter the infantry, this is the key to winning KvK1. If one of your whale has a very strong YSG El Cid Archer March, he will melt these garrison. And it is what we did all KvK. Terry is our biggest well for this reason. He has the best archer march in our kingdom right now, and he melted everyone. Even Wells with 30 or 40 million power more than him, he melted them like butter. He killed millions and millions of troops and infantry with that march. It is the key of KvK1 because it is the only way you're going to be attacking these garrison without just hitting a wall. Because otherwise, the only other strategy is replicating whenever you're attacking. So you'd use Martel YSG to attack a Martel Richard infantry garrison. So it's basically infantry versus infantry. It's pretty even, but it's obviously always sided kind of towards the defender. So it takes a long time and not much happens. And there's a lot of losses for both sides. And it's just not a great scene. So if you have one archer rally leader, it will really, really change your life in KvK1. Now, as I said, the other options is basically replicating what you have. So a lot of people would do Richard YSG or Martel YSG to rally. So having the YSG means that it saves you from being swarmed and reinforcements get hit when they go into the rally to defend it or to reinforce it. So it's very good, but usually you'll be going against the exact same thing defending, which also usually has a YSG. So it's very even and it's very, very long and slow. One other combination that really works well, though, would be Aethelflaed YSG. Now, it doesn't work well all the time, and it is a mixed army, but it is something that works good because you have more capacity bonus in your rallied army. You get attack bonus as well, and bringing the YSG helps, again, with the damage and the area of control. And Aethelflaed is a very, very, very strong commander in KvK1, so it is one of the only other options that you could use, but I would still do YSG Elcid if you can. Now, just to recap, I'm going to show you my 4 most used march in KvK. So if I go here, you see basically Charles Martel was my #1 march for defending objectives, rallying objectives, and just open field fighting. Minamoto Cao Cao was also a very important march when necessary, when I needed speed and calves for rallying city or attacking certain weaker players that had buff armies such as Joan. Now, you can replace this march with Pelagus Belisarius and still do well, or even Baybars to have a good cav march in the open field. And of course, I really recommend having an expertise YSG or a strong YSG for any player, including free-to-play, and you put him as secondary to whoever else you are managing to get, whether it be Martel, Sun Tzu, or Richard. It will work very well. You can also put him as secondary to Aethelflaed, or you can do like me and do Aethelflaed Joan and help your stronger players in Wales perform a lot better in KvK. Now, Sun Tzu Richard was my other open field army that also could defend flags if needed. It obviously is a very tanky, but still has a lot of high damage from the AoE of Sun Tzu. And lastly, Aethelflaed Joan of Arc, which I brought usually a mixed army with, which had, as you can see, a lot of infantry and a little bit of the other units, just to have the buff, but mostly to have infantry because that's where my tech is and that's the tankiest unit type. And that basically is a debuffing march for the enemy and buffs my other marches very, very well. So this is what I myself use for KvK1. Of course, I'm not free to play, but I'm nowhere near a well either. So this is something that's achievable for most players. Now, my last point being that be very careful what troops you're sending to reinforce rallies or reinforce garrison, and make sure that you as a kingdom work together and work with your wells so that you have some wells who have some archer commanders such as YSG and Elcid in order to be able to rally objectives full of infantry, but make sure the rest of your kingdom focuses on having a lot of infantry because it is a lot more important than cavalry in KvK1. So if you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment here on this video, or go on our Discord, which is in the description, and come chat with us here directly. Make sure to leave a like if you like this video because it really helps our channel grow. And if you like Rise of Kingdom content or other strategy games, if you want to see more of these kind of videos, please make sure to subscribe because we have daily videos coming out about many different strategy games and many videos of Rise of Kingdom every week. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time.